Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me here with the Quintessential Roots podcast. I'm your host, Renee Barron, and today we're going to be discussing the ancient practice of toe reading. So we have a lovely young lady by the name of Ashley Weber. And so let me give you a little bit of information about toe reading. So toe reading stems from the ancient practice of reflexology. It was China's ancient practice. It's been used more than 5,000 years ago. It seems like they always say 5,000 years when it comes to history, but it probably is much longer than that. So the practice can analyze the health and wellness and behavior patterns of the individual, and can predict and understand these patterns. So the individual can help change negative behaviors or change the course of their current life path with this modality. And some practitioners call it soul coaching. So the practitioner analyzes the shape of the foot. This particular one, there are foot readers, but toe reading, they analyze the shape of the toe and position and so forth. But today we have Ashley Weber, who will go into more depth about that. And so one of the coolest things about toe reading is that they can tune into the toe and understand the languages hidden within, the meaning behind each of your toes. And since the toes are different sections of your head, the toes then represent different aspects of your mind. And so we're going to learn what that all means. And I'm going to bring in Ashley Weber, who is a Intuitive, who offers spiritual life coaching. She offers intuitive guidance with runes, oracles, pendulums, and automatic writing. Ashley teaches EFT, tapping technique, meditation, art therapy, and offers a wide variety of products on her website. So Ashley is a master Reiki practitioner. She's a certified linguistic practitioner as well as hypnotherapist. So I'm going to bring her in. Welcome, Ashley. Thank you so much for coming to the show. So tell us, how did you get involved in this ancient practice of toe reading?
Well, it actually, when I decided I was going to return to school, I went to Southwest Institute of Healing Arts, and it happened to be one of the courses. And I had no clue at all what it was, no idea, but it just stuck out to me, and it was something that just called to me, and I wanted to figure out what it was. So I took the course, and it was just something that it clicked like immediately with me. There was almost like no learning involved. I just knew instantly what I was doing when I was doing toe reading. A lot of the other modalities and stuff that I've chosen to learn, some of them have been challenging, and I've had to kind of really study to learn the things. And with toe reading, I didn't have to do that. I just intuitively and knew what I was doing right away. And I absolutely love it. I think it's amazing. When I was a kid, I always had this odd habit of looking at people's feet. And I really never knew why I did that, but I would always look at people's feet for some reason. And, I didn't really have any idea of, when I was looking at, their toes or anything, like what exactly anything meant. But I was just always drawn to just kind of like glance at people's feet. And I did that even as an adult. And I would have to try and like keep myself from doing that because I thought people would be like weirded out by it.
Perhaps you were a toe reader in a previous lifetime. Who knows?
It could have been. I don't know, but it's possible. And so, yeah, when I started taking that class, and it just really all clicked with me, like amazingly quickly. It was it was kind of a shock to me because I didn't think that I would take to something like that easily. And I just
tell us about toe reading. Tell us a little bit more about it, because I'm intrigued. I'm sure the audience is intrigued. Tell us more about toe reading.
Well, it's kind of like a soul life outline. Toe reading is. So it can really help clarify and answer a lot of questions that you might have about your life. Everything from your careers to your relationship with other people, your relationship with yourself, your finances, your income, just your overall mindset about things. It can help to give you a little more clarity and on how well you're actually using your own intuition. Just by looking at your toes, you can see how intuitive you really are and how much you're actually embracing and using those gifts that you have. It can pinpoint areas of trauma that you may still need to heal from just by looking at the different markings and stuff on your toes. And each of your toes kind of correlates with a different area in your life. And so, if you're looking at one toe and you might see certain little subtle markings or, bruisings, things like that, little creases in your toes, all of those are kind of indicators of different things that might be holding you back in that particular area, whatever that area is that corresponds with that particular toe. So it's really yeah, it's like a blueprint kind of your whole life. And it goes everything from your past all the way up to your present. It doesn't so much show you things in the future, but it shows you from your past and your present and how those things in the past have kind of led up to your present. And that helps you to be able to kind of make the changes you need so that you can, move into a brighter future.
That is interesting because it's kind of similar. I've studied Chinese medicine, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of connected because Chinese read the body.
Yeah.
There's a book called The Body Never Lies. I meant to bring it up, but I don't have it. But it goes into like the space between your eyes means something. Your hands or the way the little dots and marks on your fingernails indicate different health issues. So I've learned to do some of that, but I had no clue that there was a practice called toe reading. So that's kind of interesting. So when you say soul reading outline, is it like a kind of like a psychic reading, or is it more like I don't know what kind of reading, like an oracle reading, or how is
It
that?
A lot of it is an intuitive thing, but the intuitive part of it comes in when I see something in a toe, and that will, I kind of get used as a tool, basically, to verbalize specific deep questions to whoever's receiving the toe reading, to kind of help bring a little bit more awareness to that particular part. So that's where that intuitive part of it comes in. But the rest of it is it's a very visible thing that you can see. And people that get toe readings, a lot of them will actually notice the look and shape of their own toes changing after they've had a toe reading, and after they've realized different areas that might be kind of holding them back. If they realize, like, I need to set up some more boundaries, with these people, or whatever, or if they discover that maybe they need to actually stop thinking about speaking their truth, but actually move forward into taking action and doing that. They'll start making those changes. And when they start doing that, they'll actually notice subtle changes in the appearance of their toes as well. So it's really kind of neat to do that. And what I do for clients when they get a toe reading is I actually take a Polaroid of their toes when they have the reading, and then they take that home with them. And that way they actually have kind of that documentation so that they can see what their toes looked like before, and then compare that as they're moving through and making those changes,
So
to see
they can kind of judge their progress then.
right. Yep.
So then how can toe reading help us mentally, physically, and spiritually? And I know you might want to break that up, but how can it help us mentally?
Well, with it, being something that kind of can be used as guidance in your area, different areas of your life of where, you might be being held back, in areas that, you might want to change a little bit to benefit your well-being. It does that. It shines clarity on that. And so mentally that can really help people that are feeling like they're very kind of stuck. They don't know, what's wrong or where these changes might need to come from. And toe reading can kind of help guide them through that.
And I know I'm a big advocate of people taking charge, taking back their power and taking charge of their health and wellness, not leaving it up to a doctor to decide what happens with their health. Because we are the ones, we know how we feel and we know what our body is like. So
Yeah.
we can use them as an advocate, but we need to ultimately be the professional, the expert on our bodies. And so I always recommend making a plan And when we're doing some healing work, like you're mentioning, when you're doing some inner child work or working on healing old family patterns that are dysfunctional, and you make a plan. You actually say, well, I'm going to do hypnotherapy, or I'm going to work with a toe reader and see how hypnotherapy is working for me, or I'm going to, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I always recommend doing a plan. So it sounds like something that might be something you want to add to it. Physically, is there anything that toe reading helps us to judge? And I kind of think we talked about that, but
Physically it can too, yeah. Just by the same kind of area as like how it can mentally and spiritually and stuff. You have, the toes will carry like those little markings of things on your feet, bruises, blisters, boils, bunions, dry, flaky skin, whatever. All of those are areas that obviously physically are, symptoms being shown and visibly being shown there. And so by getting a toe reading and having that clarity of those areas that might need that healing, that can help to address some of those physical symptoms as well. Reflexology, when you get into like the foot reading, the full-on foot reading, that will help even more so with the physical parts of it than what toe reading will do. Because toe reading is based solely just on your toes alone. You're diving in a lot deeper on each of the toes, but you're not addressing the whole entire foot, and it's all related. So you do get some of the physical that's related to those toes, but not everything.
so are you able to, so if someone had cancer, would you be able to tell?
Not so much be able to tell if there was like cancer or something like that, but whether there was some sort of physical ailment going on, that then yes, you can tell, but not specifically determine what that ailment is.
Like, so like if there was melanoma, it wouldn't be shown through like the toenails or something like that?
You can see it a little bit, but there's also so many other things that can cause like
Oh,
discoloration and stuff like that as well. So it's not specifically just a physical thing. Discoloration of your toenails also is indicators of other aspects in your life that can be holding you back too.
okay.
But I personally believe that all of our physical ailments stem from our mental capacity too. And
Oh, okay.
so if our mindset is kind of, not in the greatest shape, our physical bodies are not going to be in the greatest shape either. To me, it all goes hand in hand.
Yeah. So how does toe reading factor in with, or how is it associated with metaphysics?
Well, just like all this other stuff that we were talking about earlier with your oracle cards and your tarot cards and, your Reiki practices and even hypnosis and stuff. There's a lot of intuitive guidance that is coming into play with that. And like I had stated, when I do a toe reading, before I do that, before my client arrives and everything, I do a whole energy clearing of the entire environment that I'm going to be working in. And then I do a meditation and open myself up and ask for myself to be used as a tool for guidance for my client that I have coming in. I just want to be able to, I'm used as a tool to relay these messages from the guides and to the client in a verbal way, in a way that they can understand and gain clarity from.
Okay.
It's all about you being used as a tool, that's what I'm doing.
Okay. So what typically happens on a toe reading, and how would I or anyone listening prepare for one?
So there isn't really much that you would have to do to prepare for a toe reading, other than, show up to it. That's pretty much it. I do them online and I do them in person.
You do them online. I was going to ask that. I forgot about that question, though. I'm glad you mentioned it.
Online is obviously a little bit different than in person. For an online toe reading, I walk people through the steps of actually doing a healing foot soak for themselves. And this is basically just a pampering kind of foot soak for your feet. So you can incorporate whatever you want in there. I have a little basket that holds all of the items that I use when I do them in person.
Okay.
People at home, they can use whatever. When I'm doing it in person, I use a combination of moon water, and then I also use a combination of spring water, which I have heated. And so this way it's, a warm foot soak. It's not cold. And then I use clear quartz crystal points, and I use 5 of those. So there's one for each of the toes and one for each of your elements is what they represent. And then I use dried lavender, which I just sprinkle in there on the top of the water. I'll use fresh flowers like daisies, roses, whatever intuitively I feel called to provide for the client. I will throw those roses or those daisies, whatever flowers, in the water with them. And then I use pink Himalayan salt also. So I have a small little salt block, and that gets dropped in there too. And all of that is used in ways of purifying the energy and stuff, and just pampering your toes. Just pampers your tootsie.
And we have a image of that. Should I show them now?
Sure.
Okay, let me go ahead and show it.
Yeah.
And then do you want to explain it a little bit?
So the cards up there at the top, I use those as well as these other ones that I have. And so those cards are the soul's journey lesson cards, and they will kind of help to explain where on your life journey or your soul journey you might need you have a lesson to be learned yet, something that you're kind of going through. It adds a little clarity as to what that is. I also use a deck of affirmation cards. They're called I Am Everything. And those are affirmation cards that I will pull for a specific toe after the toe reading. Whatever toe I feel like is probably the one that just needs the most support at the time is what I will call for that, pull a card for. So down there on the bottom, the book there, that's the toe reading book. So that's just kind of, that was with my courses. And you see the lady in the corner on that book. Her name is Casey Miller, and she is actually the person that actually started this whole toe reading thing and started providing classes. So she's kind of the founder of the whole setup in the United States, which is pretty cool. And then, that's just a sample there of some of the crystals that I use. And then the little baggie, that's the lavender. I use the white towels. Those are specifically for toe reading. And then the oil there is a anointing oil that I created. I do essential oil blends. I've had training and all of that. And so this is a anointing toe reading oil that I specifically blended for toe reading, especially.
Awesome. So I have a question though, and I want the audience members to feel free to ask questions just put them in the chat and ask any questions you want of Ashley regarding toe readings. Please feel free to share, like, and subscribe to our channel, Quintessential Roots, and I'll get Ashley's information later. But I was going to ask, with the anointing of the oil and this spiritual bath, toe bath, so to speak, will this activate your gifts that you may have, latent gifts or anything like that? It just came to mind. So,
That's a really good question. And I've never asked anybody that's had a toe reading if they've ever experienced anything, different with that. But at the same time, I could see how it might do that. Because your toes can actually indicate how much you're trusting or using your intuition in itself. It very likely may activate those gifts to where you're maybe embracing them and recognizing them a little bit more after a toe reading, which of course, if you're embracing and recognizing them, that's going to strengthen them too.
Yeah, because I would think if the angels are involved in the process and for the healing, I would think that it could possibly activate those latent gifts that people may need to use,
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Yeah, but I definitely could see that being the case. Mm-hmm.
So what can you tell us about the meaning of the direction of the toes? If they're right to the right or pointing to the left or straight, I don't know. What can you tell us about that?
So basically when you're looking at them, if your toes are, perfectly straightforward, that is pretty much an indicator that you are walking that path straightforward. Okay. So depending on which toe it is, each toe represents a different area of life. So say we were talking about your middle toe, okay, on your right foot. That would be an indicator of your action toe, and that is your action towards the outside world. So that is how you portray yourself when you're, in that outside world, not so much at your private inner self, but more towards the outside. And so if that's straightforward, that's an indicator that you would be somebody who is a very dependable, straightforward, get it done kind of person. If you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it, and you accomplish it, you succeed at it, that kind of thing. Now, if it's,
I just have to interject. I have a straight middle toe, and I am that way too. So this is kind of leading into our. I'm sorry for cutting you off. It's kind of leading into the next question, but can we go through each of the toes?
Yeah. I was just going to say that, like, some people will have toes that are almost like they're like clawing down or they're turning downward. And those are oftentimes people that feel held back in that specific area. So like if it's your communication toe, they might be somebody who just feels like they're not heard. And
which one is that?
That would be the second toe.
Oh, okay.
So that's your, otherwise known as your air toe. Okay. And so if you have toes that are kind of pointed outward, okay, like pointed towards the right, those are toes that are kind of looking more towards the future. If you have toes that are, pointed inward and pointed towards the left, those are toes that are looking more towards the past. So that's kind of with the direction facing of what some of those indicators mean for that.
That's interesting. Now, does the foot, whether the right toe or the left toes, does that matter?
Yes and no. So the toes on the right foot are almost always, and I say almost always because there's sometimes where it'll be the opposite, but the toes on the right are typically of how people are connected to their outside world, where the toes on the left are how they're connected to to the inner self, their higher self, their guides, their intuition, just in their self in general. So occasionally that will be different for some people, but 9 out of 10 times that's the way that it is.
Okay.
Then you have, all the toes on both of the feet, they'll mean the same thing. So, your big toe is your ether toe, that's your destiny toe. The next toe would be your air toe and your communication toe. Then you have the middle toes, which are your fire, your action toes. And then you have the fourth toes, which are your water or relationship toes. Now the pinky toes, that's where it's different. That is where it's not a outside world and an inside world connection. Those are the toes where that can get a little confusing. On your right foot, that's your prosperity and your abundance toe.
Oh,
And on your left foot, that is your trust toe. So that is the only toe that is different from that inner and outer area.
okay. I'm looking at my toes as we're speaking. So let's go into one by one. Let's start with the big toe. Tell us about the big toe. What is that again?
So that's your ether toe, or also your destiny toe. So that is a toe that indicates whether you are truly walking your soul's path right now. So if you have a toe that is like straightforward, if you notice the tip of your toe and your toenail is almost kind of pointed up a little bit, that's an indicator that you're doing what you feel you're called to do.
So what if it's slightly slanted? So if it's slightly at the towards the nail part, slightly to the right, or
Nail part,
slightly to the left? What does that mean?
Okay, so you mean like if the tip of the toe?
The shape, yeah. You know how the shape kind of, it's not just straight ahead, but it may go, just a little bit
So
like.
if it's turned a little bit, that's going to indicate where that toe is focused on a little bit. So if your toe is, pointed to outwards towards the right a little bit and it's pointing outward, if you're looking at your right foot, I don't know which foot you're looking at. So
I'm looking at the right.
okay. So if you're looking at your right foot and it's pointed towards the right a little bit, that's going to be an indicator that your toe is still kind of searching for something more. There's something more, that you feel you're being pulled to do. And you may or may not actually know what that is. Some of the other toes might actually help answer that question as to what it is that you're searching for. So if you were looking at your left foot and it was pointed, to the left, like pointing outwards, pointing towards the rest of your toes, then that would be an indicator of basically the same thing, but more on a soul level.
Okay.
Rather than something that you would want to be providing in your connection to the outside world. This would be something that you feel initially like you're not fulfilling for yourself, something you're still searching for on a soul level for yourself. Does that make sense?
The spacing between the toes, like if there's a nice little gap or not a gap.
So between your big toe, your destiny toe, and the second toe, which is your air or your communication toe, that spacing between there is an indicator of your intuition. So, and that, if you have a big gap between there, that means you're highly intuitive and you are using that intuition. Now, if you have a smaller gap, you look at like the base of where those toes are connected to your foot, and that's where you're going to look for that gap at. So a smaller gap would mean that you are not embracing your intuition quite as much as, what it's there, something to kind of grow with. And like I said, each toe is an indicator of your connection to the outside world or your connection to your soul self. So you keep that in mind when you're looking at those gaps, whether that intuition is something that you're using more in connection with the outside world or something that you're using more as a connection to your inner soul.
Okay. Now we talked about the second toe, that middle toe. Anything more on that one?
So the second toe is your air, your communication toe. So that would be a toe that would indicate, how outspoken you are, whether you are somebody that's pretty blunt and straight to the point, or somebody that kind of maybe beats around the bush a little bit, somebody that might harbor a lot of thoughts, but then not actually speak them.
Okay, so tell me about the blunt one versus the one that doesn't speak.
So a blunt toe is going to be one that literally does look like it's just the tip of it just kind of stops. It's going and then it's just blunt, like you hit it in a wall or something. It's just and then a one that is kind of like a beat around the bush one is one that's going to be very rounded at the top. So those would be indicators there of your blunt and non-bluntness.
I don't know how to read mine because I know I'm just a matter of fact kind of person and I just speak the truth. I just, I don't think I'm more literal, so it's not meant to be rude
Right.
or anything. I'm not a rude person, but I think I'm matter of fact. So
it's all, and they vary. I mean, it's not that one person is going to have a really rounded one and one's going to have like a super blunt one. You have your stages in between there where there might be a little bit of roundness at the tip, but it's still
round. It's at the tip.
Yeah, you're looking at the tip of your toe.
Oh, okay. And if it's round, it's
if it's very round, it's more or less kind of somebody who they're not so straightforward, blunt in speaking. They're oftentimes, they still will get their point across, but they might be a little bit softer when they're doing that.
I think that's me. That is me.
They'll
Because
be a little,
I will get my point across and I will stand up, but I won't do it in a harsh way.
right.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And there's some people who have very blunt toes and they're literally like the ones, they're like, well, you're messing up your life. Get over it. I mean, there's, didn't tell you what it is. Like, they don't care. They hurt your feelings. They do not care, and those straightforward people like that, which isn't a bad thing. Sometimes we need to hear that, I'd
rather have the truth than a lie. But the delivery sometimes can really mess you up. What about the third toe?
So the third one is the one that we were talking a little bit about. That's your action toe. So also you're known as your fire toe. So that is the toe that pretty much is an indicator of how dependable you are, how likely it is that you will take the reins and take charge of a situation. So if it's on your left foot, it is most likely going to be an indicator of how much do you take action for yourself on that soul level. If you feel like you are inclined to do something, like maybe you feel like you need to engage in self-care, but you have all of these other obligations, like home obligations and stuff. How likely are you that you're going to fulfill that need for that self-care?
And how would I tell that? What would be the indicator?
It would be another one of just how the position of how that toe is looking. So whether that toe is very straight or whether that toe is kind of curved in one direction or the other or pointed downward. You would also look for, in all of the toes, you would look for like trauma lines, which are
Oh,
very deep creases in your toes. And then
you
in
mean the
order,
toe itself, like crease, and not
Mhm.
the nail? Okay.
Right, the toe itself. And basically those trauma lines, you can pinpoint kind of the the time frame in your life that those traumas may have taken
Get
place.
out of here. That's good to know because you can try to jog your memory and go back when you're doing
Yeah, and it's
child
hard.
work.
Yeah,
Wow,
it's hard
that's
to try
interesting.
and think back and be like, well, where is this stemming from? And with toe reading, it can kind of give you a timeline and that breaks it down. So you're not looking at this whole, process from birth till your age now, but instead you're looking at just a section of it, and that can kind of help
Oh, that's
to bring
very
that
good. And
surface.
so, what does the straightness indicate for that toe?
So a straight toe would be an indicator again of just somebody that is very um, very dependable, whether they're self-dependable, like their soul can depend on them, to fulfill its needs, or the outside world can also depend on them. So it is somebody, it's, sometimes sometimes like what we were learned, they called it the just do it toe, because
Really?
that's a toe that's going to indicate, like Nike has their slogan of just do it.
Yeah.
And so they would say that's the toe that's going to indicate whether somebody is just going to do it or not going to do it. It was kind
So
of one or the
we can when employers can say wear sandals to your interview, so we can see if you're a just do it person.
That's
Okay.
exactly what I said when I was taking the classes. That's exactly what I said. I said we should just have employers do this. Like, let me
Don't
just see
tell
your.
me because I might say something like that when I get to that point of hiring employees. Um, but okay, so then there's the space between
Mhm.
um,
So
that toe.
space.
What is that? Because I think I read something that means something. The space between that third toe and the fourth toe.
Well, your spaces between all of your toes will represent something. So your toes they all go hand in hand. They all kind of play off of one another in some way. Those spaces in between are indicators of how much that other toe is dependent on the toe next to it. Um, so if you have between your middle toe or your fire action toe, and then you have like maybe a pretty big space between that toe and then your fourth toe or your relationship toe, that would be an indicator that your action toe is not dependent on your relationship toe. So when you take action for something, you do not need that, recognition or that gratification from the outside world or from other people, to make you feel like you've accomplished or been successful with something. Now, if
Okay,
you
because that's how mine is. It's a gap between those two.
so for you, when you take action for something, you feel good about taking that action right away. You don't need somebody else to come in and verify that you did a good job.
Mm.
Um, Now, if you have sometimes people will have toes that are webbed. They'll have a couple toes that are webbed. Those are toes that literally they don't function without the other toe.
Oh,
So they are so dependent on each other, that it shows up that way. And obviously, even though your toes change, the webbing isn't going to change in your toes. But you may notice the direction of your toes changing. You may notice the trauma lines, some of those other little subtle physical appearances in your toes and those physical characteristics, those may change. Um, Sometimes people are walking the same path and being held back by the same things for so long that it actually permanently changes the figure of their feet.
oh,
And so when that happens, a toe reader will still be able to kind of see where those changes are and where they've taken place by looking at some of those other subtle physical characteristics. But that change in the physical appearance, think of like in China where they do the foot binding, okay? That physically mutilates and changes that appearance of their feet, and it's permanent. There's no going back to it, but you can
And they
still,
already know that. Why do they do it?
I think it's like a cosmetic thing.
Oh,
But you can still look at the toes and still do a reading, even though there's been so much trauma, physical trauma to that
okay.
foot. So that does happen sometimes where there will be, physical characteristics that just literally they won't change. They've permanently been changed. But you can
You
still
gave me an idea. When
okay.
you're dating someone, go swimming, watch them wear sandals, because if for me, if I see a man with web feet, I can't be no, because that means you're too dependent on me, and it's like no. Okay, so that's a good. That I thought of that when you were saying it.
But then if you're doing that, then you got to keep in mind what toe is that webbing on.
Oh yeah, you have to look at that too.
Because if that toe webbing is on their left foot, then most likely that's a self-sufficiency kind of indicator
Oh,
where their relationship and their action is very an inner self thing. So they're not so much dependent on somebody else. But if
oh.
it's right foot, it's going to be the opposite.
Then I have a good solution for a date idea. Have a toe reading together with Ashley. Okay. I'm being silly. Okay. But yeah, so then we're on the third toe still. So what if it's going, you said we already talked about going to the right and left, right?
Yep. So that would just be if it's pointed outward a little bit, like basically pointed outward towards your other toes, or I think of it like, okay, if you're familiar with like your chakras and how those go down the center of your body. So if you were to basically draw a line straight down, if your toes were pointed inward towards that root chakra that you have, that would be like looking towards the past. And if they are pointed outward towards the rest of the world, that would be like looking towards the future.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm
Okay.
looking at mine. And then the fourth toe.
So the fourth toe is your relationship or your water toe. So that would be, on your right foot, that would be your connection towards the other people that, it can be just the outside world, your connection to the other people in that outside world, your family, your significant other, your friends, your work relationships, And then if it is on the left foot and you're looking at the toe on the left foot, then that would be an indicator of your relationship to your higher self and to internally to your soul. That toe is a huge indicator of people. It can really shine some light on for people that maybe need to engage in more self-love and self-acceptance kind of. When you look at the relationship toe, especially, and your communication toe on the left foot, sometimes there is a huge amount of trauma, inner trauma, that's just been really held on in there, because those two they go hand in hand so much together. A lot of times you can see a lot of negative self-talk in there, and a lack of
How would you know that? Explain that part.
a lot of times it will be indicated by trauma lines mostly.
Oh, on the toe. It's
Yep, on those two toes. And something that's really interesting is if you see a very deep crease of a trauma line, and because our toes, they're not flat, so they don't go straight. They're kind of angled when you're looking at them. if you follow that trauma line across all of the toes, your toes will go, you've got your, where they kind of go in an, like almost in an arch a little bit. So your pinky toe is down a little bit lower. If you draw like an imaginary line starting from that deep trauma and then draw it across the rest of the toes, it will almost always pair up with one or more other toe. That line will connect. It's almost like an invisible line, and then it all of a sudden connects together again. And usually it's because that trauma affected more than just that one area of life. So if you noticed it was on like your destiny toe or something, and then you're looking across and you notice that now it's on this relationship toe too, and it like connects together there. That could be an indicator of, if it was like on your right foot, so to speak, that would be like an indicator that somebody in your life actually held you back from fulfilling what your purpose in life was. Maybe they didn't believe in you, or, they thought whatever you were feeling called to do was just silly, and maybe they broke you down for it, but that it's really kind of interesting. I get a lot of clients when I start reading across the toes and I'm like, oh, okay, wait a minute. Like you have this trauma line here and this communication toe, and this is connecting to, this toe, and they're right around this time frame. Did you have something, and then, the look on their face is just, it's like just this ultimate look of shock, which sometimes is one of my favorite parts of doing toe readings, because you see these people have these like eye-opening, like aha moments, where all of a sudden, like this just all makes sense. Mm-hmm. So it's very, very interesting. But that fourth toe would be your relationship toe. So okay. If you have a very straightforward toe and it's not sitting real close to another toe, your relationship toe kind of works on its own. It doesn't need to, be a coworker with another toe.
Okay. And then the last toe I call the pinky toe. What do you call that one?
So that one would be your earth toe. And that toe is, like I was saying earlier, that's the one that is different from the rest. So that's the one that is not an outside world and an inner connection. That is different for each foot. So your right foot then is your prosperity and your abundance.
Right foot.
Yep. And then the left is your trust. And so that trusting on your left foot, that is not necessarily just trusting of yourself, but it's also the trusting of everybody else in your life. So that's why that one can be a little confusing for people at first.
So if they're close together, like that relationship toe and the baby pinky toe, that would be good.
So what foot are you looking at?
I don't know, either one.
Okay. So if you were looking at your left foot and your pinky toe and your relationship toe were close together, because that's a trust, that would mean that, yes, you have a very trusting relationships with yourself or with other people. You're not one to really question, you're not afraid to let your guard down and just show your vulnerability in that to other people. You're okay with doing that because you're trusting in that and secure in that relationship. Now, if it was on the other foot, that would be, if it was on your right, that pinky toe is about your abundance and your prosperity. So if that's sitting very close to your relationship, then that means that there is a connection between your prosperity and your abundance with the relationship. Which could be both good or bad. if that toe is somewhat hiding, like behind the relationship toe, so if it looks like it's almost like slightly covered up by that relationship toe, that would be an indicator that that person basically does not feel so much like they are worthy or destined to have that abundance or that prosperity without having that relationship with somebody else. Somebody else is providing that for them rather than them feeling like they can provide it for themselves.
Now, my prosperity toe on my left is different from the one on my right. So the one on my left is close to the relationship toe, but the other one, it's it's no gap, but it's not like right next to each other.
Okay. And so basically what it would mean would be like on your left foot, then it would be a sign that you are very secure in your relationship with yourself. So most likely you're very in tune with who you are. You're accepting of who you are. You're embracing who you are. You love who you are, kind of thing. Now, if with, like you were saying, it's next to it, but it's not like super, real tight against it on the right foot. So that would be an indicator then that you don't necessarily need to, like, you feel like you are destined to have that prosperity and that you have an abundant life. Like, for you, it doesn't, having prosperity and abundance doesn't involve the relationship with the outside world. That's something that you're providing for yourself.
Okay.
So somebody that has that, where it's a very tight, close fit on that right foot, would be somebody that I would ask them a question like, first of all, I would ask them, what does abundance mean to you? I ask everybody that when I'm talking about that specific toe, because everybody has a different meaning of what abundance is. A lot of people see abundance as being successful and being a financial kind of thing. So I ask them what it is that it means to them, because that can clarify a little bit of what my next questions to them are going to be, which a lot of times is, do you feel like you're deserving? Do you feel like you have an abundant life? Do you feel like you're deserving of this or that, whatever it is that abundance means? So if abundance means, a financial thing, I would ask them, do you feel like you're deserving of, having a secure finances or whatever? And, I've had clients who have said, well, I think, yeah, I'm deserving of it, but I can't do it by myself. I mean, I have to have a good job. So that shows where that close knit to that relationship is, where they feel like somebody's got to provide that for them. Yeah, they can take the action and they're deserving of it, but they're depending on somebody else to actually provide it for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting.
Kind of on that subject, I just to give you my view of what success is, or prosperity, or abundance is, not being so successful that you forget to take care of your home. If you have children, they should be the priority, and they should be your legacy to take them to a higher level than you are yourself. So you won't let them fall through the cracks, regardless of what your position in life is. That's my view. That's always been my view, with not just my children, with my sisters, and like that. But because I have worked with successful people who their children are just a mess, and their lives are just, you can see that when they grow up, it's just going to be a mess. And so that's not success to me. You may be a judge, or you may have this fantastic business or multiple businesses, but you really didn't achieve success because your children, you did not provide for them and bring them up to, and to a level of success that they can be thriving and successful as well.
Right. And I
So
see most people, I feel like the ones that do have more of that outlook live a life where they do feel like they are greatly blessed, and that they really do have a very abundant life because they're looking at it in that way rather than, in a different way of feeling like everything else needs to come first before that family, so yeah, I do agree. I feel like, I think it's a very important way to look at it, but some people don't see it that way.
yeah,
You know,
understandable.
and they just don't. And that's, everybody's got their own little meanings to everything and takes it differently. And, you know, I'm not somebody to tell somebody else that the way that they're thinking is the wrong way.
No,
I might not.
I wouldn't either. I mean, I'm going to tell you my outlook. It doesn't
Right.
have to be yours.
I might not understand exactly why it is that you see it the way that you do, but there is a reason for it, whether it was just your upbringing, and that conditioning that you were brought up in, or, maybe life experience kind of changed your view on it. I mean, that happens sometimes. I just more or less, I try to keep an open mind to all of that with people's views and, things that I see in toes, and just even things that people talk to me about. I try to keep a very open mind to that. And I ask a lot of questions. I probably annoy some of my clients, I think, because I ask them a lot of questions. And it's not because I'm trying to pry so much. It's because I really want to understand where they're coming from and why their view is what it is, because in doing that, that can help me better provide services for them to meet their needs.
What about if you have the pinky toe, it doesn't move? Does that mean anything?
So the flexibility of the toes is pretty much, it's kind of self-explanatory. If you have flexible toes that easily move, those are toes that indicate that that person is very adaptable and accepting and just can kind of be flexible in their life. And then, the opposite would be true if you have toes that are very stiff and just don't move very much. And so that can happen with any of the toes. Any of them can be like that. Usually you'll notice it the most in the pinky toes. And your pinky toes are those kind of that trust, prosperity, abundance kind of indicators, and a lot of that is formed when we're very young. So our viewpoints and our belief on what is abundant, what is prosperity, trusting, non-trusting, that's a lot of it is formed by at a young age from life experiences that just happen. And so those toes can become very stiff and kind of set in their ways with that, and over time, if somebody is able to kind of see that in a different way and start carrying themselves and looking at it and having a little bit of a different mindset, they will notice that the flexibility in those toes start changing as well.
What if you have a very, very short little toe? What does
So
that mean?
super short toe is usually an indicator of, like, it depends on how that toe is kind of sitting next to the other toes. Okay, so if you have like an action toe that's a lot shorter than, say, your communication toe, that would be a toe where you're not going to take action until you are told to do something. So that action isn't happening until somebody comes up and says, like, you need to do this, and then if that toe's really short, the likelihood that you're actually going to fulfill that action is probably pretty slim. Most likely you're not going to. Now, if you have like a very short communication toe or your air toe, which would be your second one, that would be one of somebody who doesn't say much. They're probably quiet. They're probably really are not much of a free thinking person. They're one that they are taking whatever information is just given and fed to them rather than, thinking it themselves. It's kind of, it's in one ear, out the other kind of thing, really not, they're not filling their mind with thoughts and they're not speaking those thoughts. So those short toes are pretty much indicators of whatever area that toe represents.
So the pinky toe short would mean what?
So if you have a very short pinky toe, depending on what foot that's on, if you have a very small, short pinky toe on your left foot, which would represent trust, that would mean that you more or less don't have a whole lot of trust for anybody. The outside world, you may not even have much trust at all for yourself. Which sometimes can be indicated if you're looking at other toes on that left foot, and you'll be able to kind of connect the dots and see where that trust, that lack of trust is coming from. There might be a trauma line somewhere on one of those toes that is linked to that reasoning of having that lack of self-trust. Then if you're looking on like your right foot and your prosperity and abundance, that would be somebody who does not feel like they are deserving of having much of that. And that can be something that was conditioned in their life. They may have grown up in extreme poverty, and just really feel like that's their life. Their life will be poverty and it'll remain poverty. And that's just their mindset and how they feel. And so that toe can indicate that kind of thing.
But can someone change that? Let's say they have a little tiny toe, and I don't have a tiny toe, so it's not me. But can they change? Can the toe grow? I mean, how are you gonna?
More or less like a permanent kind of thing, but you would look at the nail also for that to verify, like, is this short toe like this? Is this like something from birth, like a birth defect of some sort? Or is this an indicator of a life experience of something within those toes? So you look at the nails on these toes too, which I probably should have explained earlier in this process too, but your nails will be indicators of that kind of thing as well. So there's so much to look at when you're doing these toe readings. I mean, you're looking at for lines, you're looking for hang nails, broken nails, chipped nails, nail colors, smoothness of nails, roundness of the toes. You're looking at like how big the top of the toe is. Like my destiny toes are huge.
Can we bring your photo up? And then you can tell us about it on there. Oh, we had some questions. Let's see. Before Deborah says she needs to get her toe read. And can you give your information? We'll put it in at the end too. Can you type it in the chat and I'll put it up?
Sure.
And then Belinda Lynn says, hi, hello. And then let's see. Deborah, David Christensen says her little toe on her left foot is further than her right. Does that mean anything?
So my little toe on my left foot is fatter than on my right foot. Yes, actually. So usually when you have that, you want to think of it as like your toes are kind of holding on to something. So on that left foot, which would be your indicator of your trust, if we're talking about the pinky toe, that would be the indicator of your trust, which would indicate that there's probably been a lot of broken trust in a life, and that those are areas that have not been healed from yet. So they're harboring there, and they're almost like they're inside a bubble, like they're encased inside this bubble. So until they're actually healed, that toe is going to look like it's almost swollen and bigger than what the other toe would look like.
Interesting. So I'm going to put your photo in. I'm going to do the before, and then you can give us an explanation on that.
Okay. Okay, so this is my now feet.
Okay.
Okay, so this would be the current feet. Do you want the current ones or the past ones first?
I thought this was the past, or was it this one?
This is the past. Yep.
Okay.
So on mine, if you look at my destiny toes specifically, you will see how they are both pointed outward more. When this picture was taken, this was at the beginning of.
And tell us which one is destiny again.
So that's your big toe.
Okay.
So you'll see how mine are kind of pointed out. Now, before this picture was taken, I never looked a whole lot at my feet. But one thing I noticed was when we started this course, my big toes had kind of started to straighten, but you can still see how they're curved. This was at the very, very beginning of learning toe reading. And so I had just kind of started to discover how much I actually liked toe reading, but yet didn't know whether this was whether this was my niche or not, you know? And so you can see the curvature in there on how they're kind of pointed outward, because I was still kind of trying to find my place and figure out, you know, what is my calling? Like, what am I here to do? But at the same time, they had started straightening out because I had gone back to school for a field that I'd wanted to do for years, you know, so I was making this progress, but I was still kind of didn't have all the answers yet. When you look at my communication toes, both of mine are pretty straightforward. You'll see the tips of my toes on my communications, especially on the right foot, which is on the outside world, is quite rounded. And I tend to be somebody that is always, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. So I do tend to try to be very, very gentle with the things that I say. I have kind of learned to be a bit more blunt and outspoken about things. But you'll also notice
now,
that
are you introverted or extroverted mostly?
I'm an INFP, so I am the most extroverted of the introverted types.
Okay. So I can tell a little bit of introversion. I'm more extroverted. I'm extrovert. I'm really so that's why, and I'm literal. I literally take in information. So I may tell you something, and sometimes because I'm a matter of fact, you might take it as rude, but it's really not rude. It's just because I'm thinking literally, you know, not inferred or anything like that. So you take in information more inferred. You might read into so that's the difference.
Yeah. You'll also notice that on those destiny toes, there's very deep trauma lines. And you see
I wonder if we can make this bigger. I don't know how to make it bigger.
Nobody can see it if I'm pointing to it.
Okay, let's see.
So you'll see
Um,
like about midway down both of those
oh,
toes.
is that a trauma? The big toe?
Yes, those are
Oh,
trauma
that's a
lines.
trauma line. Oh, let me see if I got any.
Yep.
I don't. I don't think I have one like that. Let's see.
Now, if you were to cut my toes into sections of 3,
I think I do, but it's not as that deep. Yeah.
so if you separated these toes into sections of 3, where the like birth would be right where that toe is connected to the foot, okay,
Mhm.
and then about just a little bit above that trauma line,
Mhm.
be that second stage of your life, and then from there to the tip of the toe would be like that third stage of your life of where you're at right now. Um, you can see those trauma lines there, and in my toes, these would be indicators of trauma lines that would have happened somewhere around your late teenage to early 20s. And for me,
I'm just checking.
for me personally, right around that age when I was 18 years old, I was very, very lost in what I wanted to do. I had no clue, and I ended up taking off. That was a very, very rough age for me. I kind of felt like I didn't really have a connection to anybody at all. Um, I had some very, very dark, depressive thoughts a lot. And I took off and went on a road trip at that time. And I ended up in Florida, and I lived in my car. So it was a very traumatic experience, but a very huge moment of growth. And there was so much that happened in just a few years' time that were very, very traumatic, but it also helped me grow. And now those trauma lines there are part of that. Um,
Oh,
because that really was a moment of discovering who I was and getting me started on this path of what I'm here to do.
now I have some bunions on my toes, so I can't see. I don't know if that's covering trauma lines. Would you still have them even though you have bunions?
Bunions can be.
Mine are from wearing stilettos, so a
Oh,
lot.
okay. Yeah, and so sometimes stuff like that can happen. Like they will kind of change. Um, Bunions are a lot of times indicators of like self-imposed restrictions or like anger.
Oh,
So if you look at where the bunion is on that time frame of your toe and on what toe it's on, that might indicate it might connect the dots a little bit. Um,
even if it was from wearing your shoe from your shoes, it would
it
still indicate.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So depending on, like if these were on your destiny toes or something, um,
No, I don't
look
have.
back at like the time frame of when you were wearing those shoes and the time frame in connection with that toe specifically, and then breaking that toe down into 3 sections. So you'd have your, early life stages and your middle life stages, and then your current or later life stages. A lot of that can kind of indicate like that there might have been some sort of like some kind of trauma or something holding you back during that time, something that you were seeking. Um, and then, it kind of backfired. So it gave you a little bit of negativity instead. And then that's kind of being bubbled and held in on there. Um, but sometimes there are moments where people will wear the wrong shoes or whatever, and then that can change that shape. But bunions are, that's what they are, indicators of
Okay.
resentment and built up anger and stuff in that situation.
And I
So
probably did later in life. So
if,
with my
yeah,
marriage. So.
if you see it like communication toe or something,
Mhm.
that could be an indicator of somebody who has a lot of built up anger, you know, depending on what toe it's on.
So
If
when
it's
you divide it into the three sections, what is the top section versus the middle and the
the
bottom?
top section would be like the later, like you basically would divide that into three sections and divide your age by 3.
Okay.
Okay.
So that would
So,
be my later life.
right. Yep. And then that middle would be kind of like your middle life stage. And then, the base of your toe, so where your toe connects to your foot, would be kind of like the beginning. That's like your birth. And
So
sometimes
you would
you'll
take
see,
your age divided by 3?
yep, yep. And that
Okay.
gives you kind of a approximate number of years for each stage. So if you are um,
Oh my
45 years
God,
old,
it's pretty much right. Yeah, I just did it.
you're 45 years old, you're going to have like the first 15 years of life from that where your toe connects to your foot, and then to that next section's beginning. And then you'll have the next 15 years and then the next 15 years. And that
Oh.
helps to kind of be able to um, figure out where, if you have a trauma line, that goes back to figuring out where in your life that trauma is stemming from and what may have caused it.
Okay, let's
Uh,
look at your improved feet or
so if you look at
toes.
these now, you can see the either toes are straighter. There's a wider gap between those toes. You'll also notice that the relationship toe on my right foot specifically is no longer curved quite so much.
Yeah.
Where before it was very curved inward. And that was basically an indicator that I had traumas with relationships that had impacted a lot. You also notice um, on the left foot on some of those inner workings and stuff like that. Um, I did not trust my intuition very well. Um, I was second questioning myself a lot, and you'll see that in that communication toe and in that gap, in that space between there. Whereas you look at it now and there's more of a gap there, and that toe is, it's quite strong.
So what contributed to the change? Just having a reading, or how did this begin to change?
Yep, it was having the reading done, um, and then discovering like the areas that were holding me back. And after I had that reading done, I was like, you know, just analyzing some of this, and it was like, oh my gosh, this like makes so much sense. You also notice if you look at my destiny toes, those trauma lines, you can see a significant.
Oh yeah, it did change. Let me see if I can make that. Let's see. I don't know how to make it better. I don't know. I did something before. Let me try that. Let's see. Yeah, that's it. I guess the image is too small. But
Oh,
yeah. Mhm.
maybe. But yeah, there's a huge difference in those, because that is part of where that trauma line is and what was going on. That's something that I have now realized was it was a growth and a teaching moment for me. I've taken a lot of what happened during that time that created that trauma, but I've taken a lot of that now into actually becoming a growth for me personally, and helping me on this path, because now I'm realizing that I went through all of that during that time because I needed to in order to be able to help other people that are going through similar situations. And there's a big difference in my toes between the relationship on the left toe and the relationships on the right toe. And that again has changed dramatically since I had that toe reading. And that's a lot of what that is about, is because I'm now embracing and realizing that those things were not, it wasn't bad luck. You know, I wasn't given like a crappy hand in life that things happened the way that they did. That wasn't it at all. Like, I was given those things to experience as gifts. You know, maybe not the gift that everybody wants to, you know, take the bow off of and unwrap and get excited about, but they were given to me. Those traumas and experiences were gifts to me because I needed to experience them and I needed to learn from them and be able to grow from them in order to progress to do what I do now.
Right.
You know,
those
real life.
experiences help you to help other people and have empathy for them.
Yep.
Because
And
how many times have people gone to a therapist and they can't identify? They just
right.
can't make a connection because that person doesn't understand what you went through. So
Right.
it's very beneficial for you helping
I
others.
the website there. I didn't put
Oh,
those
where
in.
is your website? Can you just tell me and I'll type it in? Or did you put it in?
Just put it in the messages. So it should be down there.
Okay, 1 second here. I see it. So I was going to ask you for that.
Yep. And then I have this one too.
So if you want to get a toe reading with Ashley, this is her information. Soulscapeswellness.weebly.com. Was there another one?
And then that's the Facebook page there.
Let's see here. All right. And I'll put that in there. All right. And is there anything that you want to mention about toe reading that we haven't discussed?
One thing I would say is that if somebody were to want to get a toe reading and they wanted to do it online, something that is different, that's important, is how the photograph is taken. So they can be done where they can just send a photograph of their feet to me. And then I can either do like a Facebook video call or a Zoom meeting or whatever to go over what I, you know, see in the toes that way. But an important thing is that when you're doing that and you're taking the picture, you want to take the picture from about 6 inches or less. And you want your feet to be flat on the floor. So you don't want them propped up on the, you know, on the recliner or something like that. You don't want them on uneven ground, or, you know, you want it to be even because you want to be able to get that clear view of that. And then you want them to be in as good of lighting as you can so that you can actually see, you know, some of those subtle little, you know, things that are on there. So nail color and like the trauma lines and stuff. Sometimes you'll get a reflection on the skin of the toes, and that'll cover up trauma lines that you won't actually be able to see very well. So it's just some tips for that.
So for people who are having their reading online, is there any supplies or things that they need?
Not so much. Like I said, I would walk them through doing some kind of foot bath, and they can easily do that. Pretty much. I mean, they can just sit on the edge of their bathtub and do that if they want to, or if they've got like a, you know, foot spa kind of.
The basin.
Yeah, they can use that, and they can incorporate whatever they want into that to do. So, I mean, they can use tap water if they want to. I use moon water, and a mixture of moon water and spring water that I've had, you know, heated a little bit. And that's just what I do. But there is no right or wrong way to do this healing foot. So you use what you do. I throw out, you know, like I send them a few ideas of things they can incorporate. Like if they want to do crystals, that's awesome, but
If you were to do crystals, what would you use for the foot? Would you use the quartz like you do, or would you use like garnet or something?
It's up to the person. They can use whatever they want, but you are going to want to make sure that whatever crystals you're using are safe to be submerged in water, because there's a lot of crystals out there that are not. So, you want to be aware of that. I really would recommend probably using clear quartz, amethyst, or rose quartz, something like that, because they are three of the safest ones, to be submerged in water for a long period of time, and they're okay. So, and they also, have I feel like some of the strongest cleansing and healing properties out of all of the crystals, that especially if we're going for clearing out any of this negativity prior to, a toe reading. I feel like those are probably the three best ones to use, but people can use whatever it is that they feel called to using. And they don't have to add salt if they don't want to. They don't have to add flowers or anything. It's whatever they kind of feel called to do for themselves.
And do you use frequency during this toe reading, or no?
No, not usually.
Okay.
So sometimes, like, depending on the person, a lot of times I will play like a certain frequency of music in the background. But that all depends on the person themselves and whether they're okay with that or not, because this is all about them. And so I want to adapt this to be the best that I can for their needs. And some people don't want the background music at all, and they don't like that. There's some people who, feel odd about having crystals in their bath, their foot soap, and they don't want that, and that's okay. They don't have to have that. Those, it's all very adaptable to the person itself.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ashley. It's been a pleasure getting to know stuff. I learned something about myself that I already knew, but thank you for sharing that. It was really accurate. I really enjoyed that. So please, guys, feel free to stop by the YouTube channel, like, share, subscribe, turn the notification button on for shows like this. So next week, we're going to have a street hypnosis practitioner. He's also a hypnotherapist, but he does street hypnosis, and his name is Jay Shaw. So he's going to be here next Sunday. So thank you so much, and for stopping by. If you have any questions for Ashley, please put them in the comments for the replay, and I will forward those to her, and she will get back to you. And thank you so much. Have a great day.